In this lesson, we are going to start talking about how to get our devices into Mosyle. And so we're going to be talking about user enrollment first, and then we're going to talk a little bit about device enrollment and automated device enrollment. So we're going to start with user enrollment, and user enrollment is used when the device is not owned by the company, but rather it's owned by the employee. And so we want to start by just creating a quick end user account. So I'm going to go over to end users here, and I'm just going to add an end user real quick. And we'll just do, and I'm just using the managed Apple ID email accounts that I created in Apple Business Manager. So I'll just go ahead and use those for both the email address and the managed Apple ID, although they do not need to be the same. And then I'm just going to go ahead and select a group for this user. And right now I'm just going to go ahead and put them into remote users. Now you might say, hey, I've got Azure AD connected here. How come this is all grayed out? And that's because this is a one-way management. It's managing down from Azure to Mosyle. So you can't edit these groups inside Mosyle. You edit them inside Microsoft Entra ID or the Office 365 or Microsoft 365 portal. So in this case, I've got some manually created Mosyle groups here, and I've also got my users are manually created in Mosyle as well. So it kind of keeps me sandboxed in Mosyle or sandboxed in Microsoft, but you can't take Mosyle created users and put them into Microsoft groups here. You'd have to do that inside of your Azure AD portal or Microsoft 365 Intra ID portal, whatever they're calling it today. So we'll go ahead and do remote users there, and then we'll hit check. So that's where she's added. We'll go ahead and hit save here. And that account has now been created. So now I have an account here and a member of a group so that I am set to start configuring an enrollment profile for user enrollment. And we actually do that over here. It's still under organization and it's under basic setup. And we'll expand that out and we'll go over here to enrollment. And we've got options here now. Again, now you'll see it defaults here to macOS, and yours may default to something else here. But in our case, what I want to do is demonstrate this on an iPhone. This is going to be for an employee-owned iPhone for enrollment. So I actually want to set up user enrollment on iOS, iPadOS, watchOS. So let's first change it to that operating system first, and then we've got user enrollment here. And you'll notice the device enrollment options also change depending on what OS you're in, because different OSs enroll in different ways. But over here on the right-hand side, user enrollment, that's what we're looking for here. So once I've selected iOS, iPadOS, and watchOS, I now can configure user enrollment. And you'll see what it says here. The user will need their managed Apple ID to enroll. The user will then have access to both personal and work data without the possibility of personal data being viewed or modified by the IT administrator. So that's a key thing about user enrollment. The other thing, as I'd mentioned previously, user enrollment really does provide for a very narrow set of configuration options, and it really does respect the privacy of the user, which is great. So let's go ahead and hit configure user enrollment here. Now there's a couple of big changes here. If you are familiar with this from previous versions of iOS, one of the things that you would normally be able to do is select user enrollment from the list, turn this on, and customize the enrollment screen. And you can still do that if you're enrolling devices that are running iOS 17 and older. You can turn this on, you can set up your standard screen, you can set up your URL, and then what will happen is users will go over to this particular URL here, whatever it ends up being for your company. You can give that out. Users will go to that with the Safari browser and they'll sign in with their managed Apple ID here. And then they'll be prompted to go through an enrollment where they download an enrollment profile, and then it gets installed and it goes on from there. But iOS 18 has deprecated this, and it is no longer supported. So if you're looking at iOS 18 devices, we need to use something slightly different, which is I'm going to uncheck this box here. And instead of user enrollment, we're going to do Account Driven User Enrollment. We can select this. And this will also work on devices running iOS 15, 16, 17, and 18, but most importantly, this will work for iOS 18. So what we need to do here is say allow Account Driven User Enrollment. And we'll check this box. And again, we can use a standard screen here. We'll see the same kind of thing. And then there's something called a well-known host. Now what a well-known host is it's actually an endpoint out on the internet that when your user enters their email address into the user enrollment field, it's going to go out there and see if it can find a little bit of information. It's basically a JSON file that's hosted out in a hidden folder on the root of your website, wherever your domain is. So like, for example, mine is automata-tech.com. So the root of that, where I'd have my index file, I'd also have maybe some images and some other things for my main website. I also have a folder there that will host a JSON file that points anyone who tries to use this user enrollment back to Mosyle or to another MDM. And that's what you call a self-hosted option. So if I choose host the well-known endpoint at your domain, you actually get this, and it says copy the JSON host at your domain. So here's what you do. You actually copy this, and I'll go ahead and open up TextEdit here, and I'll make a new file. And let's just go ahead and make this plain text, and we'll paste this in. And so basically what this does, so this is just a little JSON snippet that points the device back to this particular spot in Mosyle. And what I can do is actually save this. And what you want to call it's a specific name. It's actually com.apple.remotemanagement.json. And if it asks you, hey, do you want to use JSON or TXT, say use JSON. And then what we can do, I'll minimize this. I'll create a folder here, and I'll just go ahead and call it well-known. Can't put the dot there yet because that is used for hidden folders in macOS, as we know. And we can go ahead and put this file in here. So what you have is a well-known folder, and inside that folder you have something called com.apple.remotemanagement.json, and inside that file it actually redirects the device. When it reads that JSON file, it redirects it to Mosyle, and my specific version of Mosyle, or my specific tenant, if you will. So what I can do then is I can take this folder and I can copy it up via FTP to wherever my domain is hosted, wherever I'm hosting my website. Once I've moved it up there, I can rename this and add the dot in front of it, so that I end up with my the full name of this URL is basically going to be like automata-tech.com/.wellknown/com.apple.remotemanagement.json. So what you can do then is, once that's up there, you've got this option here to host the well-known endpoint at your domain. The nice thing about this is that when users go to actually onboard their device, they can just use the same email address and password that they use for everything else, given that that is a federated Apple ID or Apple account. So if you're using federation and you've federated your accounts, and so you're automatically creating managed Apple IDs for all of the users inside your domain, you may very well want to host the well-known endpoint at your domain as well, because then all you're having to do is have your users sign in with Apple using their regular email address, and it will generate the managed Apple ID or link up the managed Apple ID and take them through enrollment, redirecting them to Mosyle, and you're good to go. But there is a little bit more work in setting that up, obviously, and a little bit more nuance. So what we're going to do instead is we're actually going to have Mosyle host the well-known endpoint. So we'll select that, and then it asks us to put in a name. So the difference here is, instead of your user signing in like dwsmith@automata-tech.com on the device, what they're going to be doing instead is using automata@mybusiness.mosyle.com, or whatever you end up using here for your company at mybusiness.mosyle.com. And that will redirect them to a page here that looks like this, that says user enrollment, and then they'll be able to put in their managed Apple ID, which is likely different, probably different than, if you're not federating, could be different than the regular email address that they use day in and day out. So that's what we're going to do in this case, just to keep it simple. So we can go ahead and select Automata here, and that's what we're going to end up giving our end users. So this is where we could actually choose an application to install automatically when they're going through this process. Right now I'm going to leave that off, but just note that if you've got applications you want to add, you can certainly do those as required apps that automatically get installed during the enrollment process. I am going to choose to install the self-service app though after enrollment. That is the Mosyle Business app. It'll automatically install on my device. And then down here, users that can use user enrollment is either all users that have a managed Apple ID or specific users. And in our case, I want to restrict this to specific users because I'm not ready to turn this on for everyone. I just want to test it out. So let's just choose our one test user here that we created. So we'll select that Abby Smith user here, and then we'll go ahead and hit save. And now it says success here, so we know that user enrollment is now enabled. So let's go ahead and switch over to my device, and let's sign in so you can see how we onboard with the whole account-driven user enrollment, where Mosyle is hosting our well-known endpoint for us. All right, over here on my iPhone, this is my personally owned iPhone. I am connected to the network, and I'm just going to go ahead and go to settings here. And you can see I'm not currently signed in with any Apple account, but I could sign in with a personal Apple ID here if I wanted, and already have all my personal options enabled. But I want to go ahead and onboard into device management with the MDM as well. So the way I do that is actually to go to General, and then we're going to scroll down here towards the bottom, and you'll see VPN and device management, and we want to select that. And then you'll see this button here that says sign in to work or school account. So let's go ahead and tap on that. And we'll have the ability here to enter our email address. Now in this case, the email address we want to use is the one that we had configured for user enrollment, which is automata@mybusiness.mosyle.com. So let's go ahead and enter that here. Go ahead and hit continue. And now it goes through this process of asking for my managed Apple ID. So let me go ahead and enter that in here for that test user. All right, let's go ahead and hit enroll. And now it's going to start configuring. So it's going to ask me to go ahead and sign into iCloud. So I'm going to say yes, I'm going to do that. And I need to put in my password for my managed Apple ID. All right, now it's going to prompt me for remote management. Now this is the key part here. It's going to say, hey, do you want to go ahead and be managed by Mosyle? And that's actually what we want. So we're going to go ahead and hit allow remote management here. So we'll tap on that. I have to put my passcode in for my phone. So I will do that. And now it's going to start configuring my device for mobile device management. All right, and that looks like that is completed successfully, and now you can see at the top it says Managed Apple Account. It has my Managed Apple ID here. It has information about my iCloud account, and if I go ahead and hit back here, you'll see it's listed as a managed account, and if I go all the way back to the beginning of the settings app, you'll see I still have the ability to sign in with a public Apple account at the top, but the next one down has Automata Tech Services, and that is my managed account. So that's how I can have both a managed Apple ID that's provided by my organization and have my device be managed using user enrollment specific profiles and apps. And then I can also have all my personal stuff on here as well. And that allows me to use my device as I normally do, but then still take advantage of accessing company resources. Let's switch back over here to Mosyle and take a look at what it looks like now that we've got one of our devices enrolled inside the MDM with user enrollment. So let's just go over to management here. And we want to make sure we're on iOS, iPadOS, watchOS as our operating system. And we want to go over here to the user enrollment tab. And then you will see now that we have a device here. It's running iOS 18. We've got the name of the phone, the user that's actually attached to that phone, so that's the user account that's actually there. And you can see under status it is managed, so we have MDM listed there, but you can see it's not supervised, and we don't have any app, and it's not signed into the App Store yet. So this just kind of gives me a little bit of a quick look at some of the things that are on here, but one of the key things here is not supervised. That means because it's user enrolled, there's only certain kinds of payloads and configuration profiles we can apply to this device. So that's how we onboard devices using user enrollment, and specifically account-driven user enrollment in Mosyle, where the Mosyle server itself hosts that well-known endpoint.